Hey, we're here live from SPNN in St. Paul, Minnesota. Glad to have you here. Just about 3 blocks away from where about 260 babies were ripped apart from their mother's womb. Of course, that's Planned Parenthood. And it's interesting to note, though, that the federal government, through the Trump administration, has turned down $60 million of funding to Planned Parenthood in the United States, and they are pursuing more to be turned down and looking at federal criminal charges against Planned Parenthood for fraud and abuse and racketeering, a whole bunch of different items, lying to, breaking their contracts and doing things they said they wouldn't do. A lot is happening there, and it's happening to such effect that Planned Parenthood is complaining that it's affecting abortions overseas. And of course, that's good because we want to have life and want people to have life. And so the Trump administration is doing quite a lot in that regards. Also today, I filmed at an event. It's part of the judicial branch, which always goes, what is the judicial branch doing studies on this? This is the legislature's job. But they have a group, a working group called the Child Focused Parenting Time Guide. Okay, so they're putting a group of people that are put on this committee by judges and by the court to develop a parenting guide for parents in divorce situations, custody situations with their children, parents who've never been married, but just a guide to how to parent and what to look for when trying to determine which parent is going to have parenting time with their children. And I filmed 6 hours of it today, and so I haven't had time to put any pieces apart, but put any video together. But it's amazing to me to see the structure of the battle that's going on between those that want fit parents to be in the lives of the kids and those that want to remove one of the parents. And it's just amazing, and the parsing of words and the trying to make it look like you're for both parents being in the lives of the kids, but not really. It's fascinating. So there's some interesting battles going on in that discussion. But again, to me, this is the legislator's job to figure this out. But the reason the legislature's kind of passed it off to the Supreme Court is because we have divided government in Minnesota. And what I mean by that is one of the branches of government, one of the two that writes the law, the judicial or the legislative, or the House, Senate, and not the judicial in this case, but the House, Senate, and the governors. Usually, it's all been run by separate people, except for a 2-year period where the Democrats run it. But they're not for this. There's a money funding scheme going on in the child support and parenting time, and some of the Republicans have been working for, and some of the Democrats have been working for a positive resolution to try to maximize the time children have with their parents, whether it's a non-married situation or a divorce situation. So I think that's what's going to resolve the conflict and to move to a more positive situation for families if we have one branch, the governorship, by the Republicans, and the House and Senate by the Republicans. That's the only way it's going to happen, to see any positive changes in our family laws and to keep children with their parents. Right now there's too much money in the system to remove a parent, and it needs to happen for the system to work. All right, so we'll get some updates on that and see what's going on in the future. Also, we're still waiting for the U.S. Supreme Court decision on the T-shirt case. the court still has like 25, 21 cases they have to decide before the end of June. And they just went out, and usually they decide their cases and they're released on Monday. Well, what happened is they have so many cases to release, they're actually releasing some tomorrow on Thursday, and just to start getting these cases out. And they say what's holding it up is Chief Justice Gorsuch is out writing really long opinions, and so everybody has to respond to those, so it's taking longer. But if not Thursday, some other time this month, we'll hear about the T-shirt case and Minnesota case. Now, and we expect the Andy Selick and the Minnesota Voters Alliance to win, but there was also a decision just this last Monday where Minnesota was before the Supreme Court, and in a 8-1 decision, Minnesota lost. Okay, and that's kind of the pattern of when Minnesota gets to the Supreme Court, is that they tend to lose their cases. And now I'm drawing a blank on what the case was about. Oh yeah, it was about if you divorce and you have an insurance policy, you own the insurance policy, and you have your ex-spouse as the beneficiary. If you divorce, Minnesota law says the ex-spouse is not the beneficiary. The contract changed, and they basically says the money goes to the kids. So that was the issue, was, hey, that law is unconstitutional because people have the right to contract. And this person who died and had his ex-wife as the beneficiary, he went and bought his policy before the law changed. The law changed, then he died, and then the kids sued for the money because the ex-wife took the money, and the kids are suing, no, this is our money. And the ex-wife is suing and saying, no, it's our money, and that dad would have never let her have the money, and all this type of thing goes on. And then with the law change, he didn't have to change his beneficiary. All kinds of tangled things going on. But Minnesota's decision was, it was a contract, the ex-wife gets the money, and the Supreme Court said, no, the law changed. He needed to change his beneficiary or write a document saying the ex-wife gets the money, which he may have wanted. You know, you would think you wouldn't have to change anything. But when the law changed, the court said he needed to change it. So interesting stuff. Minnesota at the Supreme Court, and we'll have another answer in the T-shirt case coming pretty soon. Now, the main topic, highlight today, I have A.J. Kern with me, who is running for the 6th District Republican U.S. House of Representatives.
That's right.
Yeah. Now, this is your second time.
Yes.
Okay.
And by the way, thank you for having me on.
I'm always glad to have you on. You got so much information that, you know, people don't get in the regular news and don't get from Tom Emmer. Now, you're running against Tom Emmer, and he's the endorsed Republican. Okay. But you're running anyway.
I am, because I strongly disagree with what's happening in the 6th District and in Minnesota.
So now the last time you ran, you did pretty good against him.
Tom had the worst Minnesota GOP primary win in over 50 years. So we didn't do too bad for a grassroots campaign against a sitting congressman. So I'm going to give it another shot.
Okay. And you've had another 2 years to develop your grassroots more, but then it also seems like there's been other problems that have arisen, or Tom has exposed himself to a bunch of problems, of things he's doing or not doing. So why are you running against Tom again?
Well, I see a lot of things happening in St. Cloud, for instance. The people are being silenced, literally. by the city council. Their city councilman, Jeff Johnson, has tried very hard to say, hey guys, the Refugee Act of 1980 is, it's not being respected. And Tom Emmer has been nowhere to be seen. And when this issue did come up in a town hall, I think it was in 2015, he basically admonished people, and he just hasn't been around to discuss this with people, what's happening. And so the Refugee Act of 1980 was written at a time that refugees were fleeing communism.
Sure.
And that's not the case today. And so we need to address that. We have parts of the law where the agencies like Lutheran Social Services are supposed to have quarterly meetings to allow state and local representatives, public voices to have a voice and input before a refugee actually steps into the community, and that's not happening.
Wow.
And
I mean, that's huge.
where are the representatives at the state level? Jeff Johnson, again, city councilman, has been trying really hard to say, hey, you guys need to respect this. We need public input. And he's been knocked down pretty hard. Mm-hmm. He's pretty frustrated because he's been standing alone. But
well, when you mean by knocked down, he's getting a lot of resistance from, who's that coming from? The mayor, council members?
Right. I mean, you're labeled, definitely the other city members of the city council, the mayor. So they've decided to adopt policies that come from the UN, like welcoming cities. This stuff really is from the UN. And,
well, who runs the UN? Isn't it the mostly Muslim countries that run the UN?
Yes,
I mean,
the globalists and Islam, yes, the Muslims.
Run the United, okay.
So as we all know, we're not foolish. We know what's going on, and so they have the League of Cities and now human rights commissions that we all pay for, and it's a way of gradually taking away our rights and controlling things. And so when you have this refugee resettlement, it's just one more way to displace our communities and take away our voice because we have no input, because they circumvent the 10th Amendment by using non-government organizations or voluntary agencies. They like to call them VOLAGs.
Is that the same also as NGOs?
Yes,
Okay.
NGOs, non-government organizations, which would be Lutheran Social Services, Catholic Charities. I wrote about that back in 2015, how they take in, they may be around $100 million a year now for Lutheran Social Services. It was like $98 million a year.
And that gets paid out to the Somali refugees that are coming in?
Not exactly. It's just that the organizations get so much money per head, and but they're not subject to public data laws is the thing. So
Really?
I can't.
Because they're UN, it's UN money?
No,
or
just because they are not
It's
an
federal
arm
money,
of
so-
government. They
Oh.
take our money,
Oh, okay.
but they're not accountable to us. So you can't.
Because they are an NGO. They're
Yes.
non-government
Yes.
organization.
So you cannot submit a public data request. And so this is something that's gradually happened, and it needs to be stopped.
Yeah.
We need our people in Congress saying, you know, we need to stop, we need to back up here, because what we're doing is we're silencing the people, we're discarding the voice of the people, and the 10th Amendment, basically, the states' rights. When the federal government can go scoop up a third world population and drop them wherever they want to, and the local people have no voice, we have a problem. And apparently Tom Emmer is agreeing to that, because he's said nothing about it to represent the people who can see that St. Cloud, like other communities in Minnesota, like Wilmer, Rochester, that they have to pick
Somalicville
up,
and Minneapolis.
they're having to pick up housing, food assistance, medical assistance, and now we know daycare assistance.
Right.
So shouldn't we have a voice where our taxes are being spent and how?
Well, we're supposed to. Describe for me in more detail St. Cloud. That's in your, would be in your jurisdiction. How is this affecting St. Cloud as far as the use of all these, the city, the counties having to start picking up the tab on?
Millions of dollars, and they're not wanting to be transparent about it. It's very difficult to get the numbers. It's difficult to, because, how dare you ask? The city council even, Dr. John Palmer has looked at data and provided about 4 papers on the data of the millions that it's costing us just like about health. We're bringing in tuberculosis and things, and some of it's not treatable, so we bring people who have to have lifetime care. And he tried to speak at the city council, and they actually had him escorted out.
During public presentation?
Just trying to speak during public input.
And they wouldn't let him?
They wouldn't let him speak.
Wow.
So the people are being silenced while we're watching this population grow. It's affecting the schools.
How is it affecting the school? What's it doing to the
Because,
schools?
it's logical. As you have a growing population of English language learners, and you've got to start spending, millions to accommodate that. You have to hire interpreters. You have to hire other people to help them with other things that they need, their medical. So it's, and then we have crime. I mean, crime is really going up in St. Cloud, but it's difficult to find out the truth about it. It's
Get the statistics, who's doing what.
exactly,
Okay.
because a lot of it isn't really being put out there by the city itself. Media is not really covering it, but it's impacting whether you feel safety. But our housing is impacted. Low-income housing overloaded, but the value of homes declining, and you have senior citizens that are having to kind of bite it. That's their home.
So
where are they going to go?
Normally, they can't afford to move. So normally, if you have housing demand, that raises the price of houses and apartments and rent and all that. But this is having the opposite effect?
Well, people are leaving.
Okay.
People are leaving, and we know that Herberger's closed and some other businesses have closed, and those people will, they've come in as cheap labor. Are they going to leave, or are they going to just go sign up for government assistance and have put even higher demands on the local government, the county? It's not a good situation. There's people are leaving. Students are leaving the school district, and the surrounding schools are starting to feel that impact.
Is that happening at the universities too?
St. Cloud State is in big trouble, and yet I don't think they'll admit it.
Well,
but
they just ask for more money.
It's not doing well. In fact, because the refugee population has moved into housing around the university, a lot of the students don't feel safe. They don't live there any longer, so now my understanding is that they have busing. So the students live away from campus, further away, and they have to be bused. But
Where
I
they
think
normally wouldn't have to do
enrollment,
that. Right.
I think enrollment is declining. So it's having an impact, but everybody's being silenced. It's the silencing of St. Cloud. The rest of the district, 6th District, needs to realize that you've got the second largest Somali refugee population, and you're targeted. You're targeted. St. Cloud's targeted, the district's targeted because you're a conservative, traditionally. What other city is as traditionally conservative as St. Cloud?
Right.
So how do you change it? You change the demographic. You bring in people who are going to be voting Democrat predominantly.
Because they know that's where their money's coming from. Is that basically it, or why?
Well,
why would the refugee community be voting Democrat?
you think they're Republicans? Do you think they're constitutionalists or?
So they don't want our Constitution.
They typically go with the Democrats and displace Democrats too eventually.
As we're seeing in Minneapolis.
Exactly.
I mean,
Yeah.
Phyllis Kahn being a mainstay of, and wanting to still be in the House of Representatives, lost her seat, lost the endorsement.
And that's where the city council, they don't realize that they will eventually be replaced as that population grows. But
well, this is I hear this is a cultural issue, that these particular refugees we're bringing in don't want to have our Constitution, have our freedom. They want their culture to overtake ours. Is that
I believe that's true.
okay?
Yeah, I believe Michelle Bachmann thought that was true. I don't think Tom Emmer thinks that's true. He said they were the most, I believe I recall him saying that he thought that they were one of the most fastest assimilating groups, and that's not true. They've openly said that they will not assimilate, they want to integrate, and that's one of the things that I think that President Trump should be going back to the federal documents, take out the word integrate, put the word assimilate back in, because words have meaning. The people that have come here throughout our history have assimilated. They wanted to come, be Americans, and adopt our culture. And so there's a woman who teaches at the community college in St. Cloud, and she's been giving some presentations about that. She does not want to assimilate. She wants to integrate. She says her community wants to integrate. And what that means is they want an equal seat at the table. They want to come with their culture, and they want the host culture, us, to take them as equals, and even if that means that we pull our culture back a little bit to accommodate them, which is what we're seeing. And so that's causing a lot of problems.
And they will use the Republican form of government, or democracy, which are two different things, but what I hear you saying is they'll use the democracy to integrate and not assimilate, and basically roll over and say you have to do things their way.
And you're kind of touching on something else, the Muslim Brotherhood. We know from the Holy Land Trial, documents were found, and that is their goal. They're going to be using our freedoms against us, basically, to infiltrate government, infiltrate political parties. And I was very vocal that I did not agree with the Republican Party accepting a Somali party affiliate, just because, first of all, there's only a few that have shown up, and so just come and be a part of the process. I don't know why we had to make a big deal out of it, but you know, I guess this is a good time to say that I've also been vocal that as a free American woman, I don't accept my government bringing in a third world culture that's misogynist. I don't want to fight that battle again.
Right.
And so I don't agree with that. And so I don't have to accept my government doing that.
You lived in what country? You said?
Iran.
Iran. Okay.
Yes, when I was a teen. So
okay, so you know at least Iran's culture pretty well, and how they treat women.
right. So when you come to the party,
was it any good?
no. So are we going to have the free American women sitting there, and then next to us will be the Somali women who are not seen or viewed as equals in their community anyway? I don't know.
But they even see you worse
Right.
than the
Right.
Muslim man or Somali man, and that's a Muslim. They don't see their women very valuable, but they'll see a non-Muslim woman even worse.
Right, right. But that's why 98% of Somali women have some form of female genital mutilation, because it's control. And that is the culture that we are bringing in.
Well, how does someone like, I may mess her name up, Ilhan Omar, a woman.
Who should be investigated for immigration fraud.
Okay, right.
But again, the
And
laws do not
marriage-
apply.
And the marriage fraud.
Yeah.
Right. How is she seen in the Muslim community? How does she get to run for office? You know, I mean, to me, it seems to be, well, look at this. This is a Muslim woman looks like she's got all her liberty. What's going on there? So what is going on there?
Yeah, I think part of it is just if they can promote someone like that, it is a foot in the door. It doesn't mean that their whole community is going to start respecting women and not practice something, their traditions, when they're insisting on bringing those traditions here. So having a woman here, a woman there, it's by no means meaning that they're changing their whole culture. They're not.
Well, are you saying kind of more useful tools, or they're being used by the male leadership?
I suppose, like Linda Sarsour, she comes here and she has the freedom to be very vocal. But you know, let's just put her in an Islamic country, and we'll see how vocal she is. It's just silliness, really. But
Right.
this is part of the Muslim Brotherhood Terrorist Designation Act. I would sign that and work very hard to get it passed. There's a lot of members of Congress who have signed it. Tom Emmer has not. And why? I don't know. Is it because he's partnered and teamed up with Keith Ellison a number of times? And if that passed, I would guess that Keith Ellison may have some problems, because he is linked. He does have ties to the Muslim Brotherhood. But Tom has partnered with Keith Ellison, one, to create the Somalia Caucus. Okay, fine. But now they partnered for remittances, meaning for the Somali community to send, you know, a community that's highly dependent on government assistance, and now they can send a part of that that's meant to help them here for their housing and their food and their medical. They can take a portion of that and send it back to Somalia. So Tom apparently is in favor of money leaving the district and leaving the state. Well, Keith Ellison, he's definitely for that. I guess Tom is. And so we're basically funneling taxpayer dollars.
And this is Minnesota dollars, right?
Right.
Is it? It's not federal dollars coming in?
No,
or is it?
this would be the state money. I mean, the assistance that they get. And for daycare, now that we know, why do people, you know, if you really were to stick to the Constitution, I'm not sure that the government's responsible for your daycare.
Right, it's not.
But we're providing that. And so we've got well over 500 billion. It's become a huge industry worldwide, and billions of dollars are leaving the U.S.
Across the nation.
And
about
to
500
Mexico.
billion.
I mean, President Trump was serious about having Mexico pay for the wall. There is a border wall funding act that Tom also hasn't signed, and I believe the formula is to take like the remittances and take out about 2% and have that, you know, so somebody from Mexico comes here, let's say legally,
Sure.
and they're doing a roofing job.
Okay.
They make an income and they send some money back to mom, and so we would take about 2% of that
Oh, so if they,
and
if
use
money
that
left,
towards the wall.
Okay. Now, they'd have to declare that somehow, or you'd have to know that they're doing it.
Right.
Cash in envelopes, or, you know, they probably wouldn't do that.
Well, that's the thing, is that now that you have the fraud and you know there's suitcases of millions of dollars of cash,
Right.
leaving the country, and Congressman Emmer has nothing to say?
He's got nothing, he's not
said
said
nothing?
anything about all of
No,
this?
not that I know of.
And these daycares, are they also in your district that are participating in the fraud?
I'm not really sure where the
Okay.
locations of the daycare are, but, you know, if there's fraud in the daycare, there's fraud in
Right.
other places.
Well, you figure out how
And-
the system works, and then you
Yeah.
can multiply it over different agencies. But I think what's interesting also on this daycare fraud going on is, once it was announced, we haven't heard anything for about a month now.
No,
That's just bizarre to me. I mean,
No.
you know, the person complained, I'll have to call them up and get them on the show, you know, but the AG's office, you know, it's just like, the press has just gone silent on that.
and so it's kind of like when the people go to the city council meeting, or they go to Tom Emmer, and they say, okay, we have this community that's highly dependent on our taxes. It's
Right.
affecting the crime level. It's affecting our schools. Who do we go to? Well, everybody says, well, it's not my responsibility. It's so you're getting the same thing with the fraud. There were some people that were up at the Capitol, and I saw a little bit on Facebook, and it's basically, oh, well, it's the county's responsibility, or it's the federal government's responsibility, or whatever. It's all the scarecrow of, I think they went that way or that way.
Right.
It's nobody. It seems to.
Who's gonna have the buck stops here? And of course, that's not in our current Attorney General's office. They're not gonna do that. And I think that's why Keith Ellison's running for Attorney General. How do you give up a U.S. Congress seat to go run for Attorney General in Minnesota? I can't, I've never heard of that happening. I just don't see that scenario of a federal office going to a state Attorney General's office.
Well, this is the fox will be guarding the hen house, and there will be no investigations. We will have crazy fraud. We will have crazy amounts of money leaving the state. And this is another reason why it's so important to pass the Muslim Brotherhood Terrorist Designation Act. Because he is tied, there was congressional testimony, he is tied to the Muslim Brotherhood. It would be the best thing for Minnesota to get that passed at the federal level and take action. And because if Ellison becomes, if he takes that office, I don't even know what to say, but what we're doing is global wealth redistribution.
Well, here's what's going to happen. I mean, right, global wealth redistribution, but if Ellison gets that seat, that means a lot of other people are going to get their seats that are going to cover this up. You know, and it's very likely that there'll be no attempt, no checks and balances. I mean, that's why, to me, this election, this time, is the most stark contrast between, are we going to support our country, or are we going to support other countries, you know, and other ideology, where we won't have the freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of press. It's attacked enough in the courts as it is, but Minnesota is just going to be a wasteland. I mean, that's how I see it. If Ellison gets in, or people who share the same philosophy.
This is a key election year. If the people don't stand up and defend their state and their culture, this is going to get ugly, because you already have people not doing their jobs at the state level and covering up. You've already got Republicans partnering with Democrats, not just Tom Emmer and Keith Ellison, to send money out of this, you know, accommodating that, because the banks stopped wire transfers.
Right.
And they did it for a reason.
Right.
Because it was corruption and money was going to Al-Shabaab. For some reason, Tom Emmer thought that he should partner with Keith Ellison to get this going again.
Wow.
And so now we have global wealth redistribution. It's a negative impact on our economy. And we have to stop being this demographic change. and not having a voice or anything to say about it. And, you know, people better realize that your way of life is changing, and but you have a right to defend your culture. And if you're not concerned about your pocketbook,
you better be concerned about your
because
life.
the more people you bring in that are dependent on government assistance, somebody's going to pay for it.
Right.
And so the Republicans at the state level keep partnering with Democrats to, you know, they were trying to pass the $18 million for a Somali pilot grant program. Now, where do you think that money was going to disperse to? Do you think some of it was going to end up in Somalia?
Well, they
Maybe.
don't need it here, obviously. They don't need the 18 million here because they're already sending hundreds of millions overseas. Why don't they leave 18 million out of that hundreds of million here? So they don't need the money. They got this scam worked out pretty good.
And then we haven't even hit foreign aid. So Tom Emmer partnered again with a Democrat, a socialist, Amy Klobuchar. And because President Trump wanted to cut foreign aid by 31%. I'm in favor of that. I don't think we're constitutionally responsible to support other countries.
No.
It's abused. It's way too high. It's abused. We're not seeing any improvements for our money. It's just flushing it down the drain, lining corrupt pockets. And so he partnered to fight President Trump on cutting the 31% on foreign aid. So now we spend close to $30 billion a year, and I don't think that's really all of it. I mean, we were funding Somalia's military, and
Wait,
that
what?
stopped. That stopped under Obama because we couldn't track the money.
So we were funding Somalia's military. Was that just an executive decision, or was the
I don't
House
know.
and Senate pass it? Or?
I don't know. I really don't know that.
Okay.
But I've read articles about that, and you know, it's a surprising thing. Just with the remittances were stopped because the banks wouldn't send it because they couldn't track it. They knew some of it was going to terrorist organizations.
And the banks had
And
laws.
we can't track a lot of this
Right.
assistance.
And the banks had laws that said they would get in trouble if they were to do that. But then the Obama administration was telling them to do it. And they just said, no, we're not going to do it. That's my understanding.
Well, anti-money laundering laws were putting the banks at risk. And so they didn't want to carry that responsibility.
Right.
So now suitcases of cash will do. So, and then they still get foreign aid. And you know, we're not a rich country anymore. We're 21 trillion
In debt.
in debt. So when do we start using common sense and say, we're not rich anymore, we're digging the hole deeper and deeper?
It's a debt-based economy. We're not an asset-based economy.
And so why do we keep acting like we're Uncle Santa Claus, you know, to the rest of the world? I'm sorry if you have problems, but you need to go solve your problems. If we're going to do something, send them rice and beans and water and medicine, but help them where they are at a degree that is reasonable.
Right. It's even better to help them help themselves.
Right.
To raise the rice.
So instead, we're supporting the country of Somalia because between remittances and foreign aid, that's what they depend on. So we're supporting the country, and we take their unskilled, poorly educated, and bring them here and dump them in our communities that aren't prepared for them. It doesn't make any sense.
And I hear a lot of Republicans, I mean, in this debate that are really attacking your point of view, saying we don't see them as human. Well, it's just not true. These are humans. They're created by God. People will say everybody's a child of God, but that's not what the Bible says. But they're created by God, they're humans, they have value, they're precious, we're pro-life, all of that. But then it comes to human nature and philosophy and what somebody else thinks of you, and if they think of you as the enemy against their God, let's go off and cut off their heads, let's abuse them in whichever way we want to abuse them. You can't ignore that. And that's what I see certain people in the Republican Party ignoring.
We're ignoring that we're in a war.
Right.
We are in a war.
Right. Exactly.
We have
and we're bringing the enemy
We have
here.
men and women sacrificing their, all the time. They're at risk. And we're pretending like that war doesn't go on. But let's talk about compassion for a moment. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
is it really compassion to go back to the way we did things in the 1700s, bringing people from another continent, Africa. People came here also from Europe or wherever. They had to borrow the money for their ride here on the ship, and they were indentured servants.
Right.
And they had to work as an indentured servant until they paid that before they were free. So now we have people coming from places like Somalia, Kenya, other places. They have to borrow the money to fly here, and then they have to pay it back. So they're in debt when they get here. Then they don't have the skills to survive in a modern society, poorly educated, and so either they just live on government assistance or they go and they serve as cheap global labor for the corporations, cutting up chicken, for example. So then they don't get, the corporations are not paying them a livable wage. They get stuck in apartments where, how do you move up? I mean, you depend on the taxpayer for food assistance, housing assistance, and take care of your medical. I'm not sure that's really compassion.
No, well, it's not compassion to them, because to me it's another form of slavery, live here.
I mean, are we creating the 21st century plantation economy?
Exactly.
But this is the corporate lobbyist has access and the ear of Congress. And that ties into Congressman Emmer working for a private organization called the NRCC, National Republican Congressional Committee. It is a private committee. And he has said on his Facebook, he celebrated a March dinner and he said, we've put in very, very long, hard hours, many hard hours. I thought the people of the 6th District wanted their congressman to represent them 100%. He's not.
So he's not calling here and raising money from his people, or not getting the ear of his people.
We don't have the kind of money that they need. So the NRCC hands the members of Congress, when they come to serve, a bill. And that bill will tell them how much they owe for their committee seat. It depends on which committee and the ranking on that committee, what their bill is. It could be $500,000 or $1 million. And this is fairly new since Citizens United in the Supreme Court. Okay. So we call that extortion.
So NRCC is an individual.
Pretty much.
A free association of individuals.
And Tom became the deputy chair for this private organization that we would call extortion, but Congress writes its own rules. And so this is a way they figured out to make members of Congress put in many hours a week calling special interests, corporate lobbyists, because they need the big money donations for their committee seats. And
are the Democrats doing this too?
Yeah,
I'm sure they are. Okay.
But it needs to end. There is another caucus that's trying to address this. This has not been going on for a super long time. It's just they've figured out how to raise the money to keep the globalist elite establishment in power in Washington. That's the swamp. And there's actually a series on Facebook called The Swamp. And in episode 3, which is the latest episode, Representative Massey holds up his bill that he's supposed to pay for his committee seat, and it's got NRCC right on it. And you can go to my blog, ajkern.com, and I've got links to all that.
Okay.
ajkern.com. I have an Emmer's record page
Okay.
that documents that. So,
And it shows who he's raised money from? Does it show that and how much he's raised, or just
no.
what his seat costs? Or-
It just shows what's going on, how this is working,
Okay.
about the NRCC, that he's deputy chair for a private organization that's basically acting as Uncle Guido. And members of the Freedom Caucus are trying to be vocal about this. They don't think that they should be having their arms bent back on the, and blackmailed basically to pay for their committee seats and having to spend hours listening. This is why they listen to the corporations who want the cheap labor or whatever they want.
So I'm hearing you probably would join the Freedom Caucus if you got
Absolutely.
elected? Okay.
Absolutely. I think they're the good guys. They've got the white hats on, the good guy hats, cowboy hats in D.C.
Yeah. So it's all intertwined in a way, because when you talk about the NRCC, you're getting back to the corporatists. They got to raise this big amount of money from the corporations, and they're all tied into the UN and to the Muslim nations that run the UN. And it's all. So how do you get somebody in the 6th District to actually represent the 6th District and not the rest of the world? Sounds to me like they got to elect you.
Well, yes. Yes. I think the representative should be working full-time, should be representing the district full-time. And looking at look at the Refugee Act, since it really impacts the district. It's got so many problems, and just our other laws that are being ignored. Let's just go back to the beginning as to the definition of who actually qualifies to be a refugee by our laws.
Yeah.
Now, Somalia was not invaded by any other country. They're not leaving because of their race, because they're the same race. They're not leaving because of their religion, because they're all Sunni Muslim. They've been number 2 or number 3 on the World Watch List for the extreme persecution of Christians. So Christians are basically non-existent anymore.
Okay.
Sharia is the law of the land. So you're fighting with each other. I'm not sure that doesn't fit our legal definition of you qualify to be a refugee.
It would be like, it sounds to me like what's going on over there is if you had 2 gangs in LA doing some turf war stuff, and then because of that, both gangs qualify for being able to move to Chicago and the government paying for it because they're in turmoil.
Yeah.
So here's a whole different country where they're having their gang wars or whatever it is, and we're saying, well, we'll bring you both over as refugees, when you're not.
So we have a failed state. We bring their population here, and now what are we seeing? Fraud, abuse of the system. They're not embracing our culture. I mean, they've said so I take their word for it.
And is there anything in their culture that says this is wrong for them to do? I don't think there is.
I think it's wrong for them to embrace Western society.
There you go, okay.
I mean,
That's a good way to put it.
So I think the bigger issue is that we're not allowed to talk about all this. Because then you're racist or Islamophobe or whatever.
Right, and it really has nothing to do with it. It's
No.
about protecting your family, your children, your country, your ideology, your beliefs of freedom of press, freedom of religion, freedom of speech. That's not allowed in their culture, in their society.
Right, and people are afraid to speak up. When did that happen? When,
Yeah.
when did we become afraid to speak up? Because, you know, if we had our differences or we didn't agree with a political policy or whatever was happening with the city council, no one was afraid before. But now it's taboo to even have these conversations. So I do think our freedom of speech is being impacted, and there is an effort to push blasphemy laws. It's happening in Europe.
Right.
And so if people think that's not coming here, you've got a big surprise coming.
Well, there's a couple countries in Europe now that are expelling.
Austria.
Austria, I think Hungary. They're starting to expel Muslim immigrants.
And these were countries that were under totalitarian strongholds for a long time. So they know, they remember it.
Right.
So that's kind of interesting, isn't it? So now we're bringing in a population that is so counter to our Constitution and our culture that now we're seeing Sharia compliant banking.
Right.
Why? Why do we need that?
And is it being forced on us? Not yet, but probably.
Are we going to have
it will
two
be.
parallel systems?
Right.
You know, because that's maybe where we're headed before.
Well, I think that would be the beginning, you know, and be part of it, but by the time you get there, it's too late. It's going to be over. America will not exist as it is today.
Yeah, if we're not willing to defend the rights that we have right now. And that's why I'm so strong about the Second Amendment, because without it, we're not going to be able to defend the rest of our rights. But things are changing. And, you know, a person that I know said, well, you know, this is just the new normal in St. Cloud. Well, in 10 to 20 years,
Wow.
it's going to be a different new normal.
Right.
As the second wave
And births and more immigration.
Yeah. So, but my whole thing isn't just about refugees or money flying out of the state in suitcases. I mean, that's bad enough. But
It's a problem that needs to be addressed.
but we have Congressman Emmer who does things like the omnibus bill, not quite being honest about that. The way it works, and it's complicated and it's meant to be, but there's a vote before the omnibus bill is brought to the House floor. Now, 25 members of Congress tried to keep the omnibus bill from coming to the House floor. It only would have taken a few more, and it would have died in committee.
Uh-huh.
Tom Emmer
Right.
was not one of them.
Okay.
He helped vote and bring it to the floor where leadership and Tom Emmer knew that it would pass, but it would be safe for him, being from a strong conservative district, to vote against it then. So he voted for it before he voted against it.
Okay.
So
Sure.
it is complicated,
Right.
and it's supposed to be.
Right.
But he could have voted to keep it from
He's
the
saying
floor.
he was against it, but I'm gonna allow the vote to take place.
Where they knew the Democrats would help get it through.
Right. Where he could have blocked it from
But if you
happening.
don't want a bill to be voted on, you keep it from the floor. You help it die in committee.
Yeah, and there's so many games that a person can play in so many ways, to pass a bill and to not have a bill passed. And you can give people all the inkling that you're in favor of something when you're not, and could actually work against it when you're saying you're working for it.
Right, right.
So, I mean, we talked a lot about Tom Emmer and what he's not doing, and really basically not representing the 6th Congressional District very well. We got about 2 minutes left, so a minute and a half maybe. What are you going to do, for the 6th District? You've kind of already said a lot of things, but
Yeah, I think we need to tackle what's really happening in the state and the district and in our country. I mean, we've completely turned our back on the Constitution and our laws, and that's why we're in so much trouble, like with DACA. There was a vote to take away the funding from Obama's executive order. Tom didn't vote to take away the funding. So we have to, I want to go back and work with the Freedom Caucus, and I know one person isn't going to make all the difference in the world, but you know what? I would be one more person being on the side of the good guys and put forward legislation to say, we have to do something about the Refugee Act. We've got to do something to get rid of these non-government organizations acting as branches of government, using our taxpayer dollars. We've got to stop this nonsense. And people know I'm pretty much a loudmouth.
Exactly. But I think, Tom's a loudmouth too, but the difference is you're not going to play the game. You're going to shoot straight with people. That's the way you are.
My loyalty is not to a party. My loyalty is to God and country.
Right. And our Constitution. And not going to play the money game, going to be straightforward with the people. And
I will work to keep the omnibus bills off the House floor.
And the basic reason that's kind of isn't happening right now is because there's not enough of people that are in that Freedom Caucus that are working that. And there's a tipping point where it all changes. So, all right, we're done for today. Okay,
ajkern.com.